Now, I've had an interesting thought over the last couple of days, and it's to do with what actually exactly is science. Because the definition you would have been taught in school is what makes up the world around us. Your chemistries, your maths, your physics, your biologies and all that sort of stuff, that is essentially the world around us. Even maths is actually quite a more deeper and intricate sort of study into everything that makes the world tick, essentially. But there are loads of other sciences out there. You've got things like economics, for example, which is like a social science about decision making and finances and consumer behavior and all that sort of nice rich stuff. At least I quite personally find it quite interesting when studying economics at A level. But then you've also got things like psychology, which is generally not something that's considered to be like a big science, but it's the study of how the brain works, and that also comes into decision making and all that sort of stuff. But I think I now truly understand the definition of science, and this can be completely different to you, but to me it is experimentation. Science is nothing. This theory essentially is nothing without experimentation, discovery and implementation. If someone gets an idea about something in the world around us, as school says science is, something that really catches their eye and their mind, and they want to look into it and discover more about it, they will experiment about it, and depending on their results, they will see what they can do with that result. They will see what they can do with that result to better society. I think science is a wonderful thing and can basically solve a lot of the world's problems, but genuine practical science is actually really, really interesting and has become way more interesting even after I read like the first couple of chapters of this book. It's got quite an interesting title, and it's to do with psychology and how psychology is a science, and it's titled The Wisdom of Psychopaths, which, don't get me wrong, seems like quite a weird title at first, admittedly, but it was talking about how the psychology of psychopaths actually works, how their brains function, how their emotions function, and how you can use elements of psychopaths to actually better your success and make yourself more successful in the modern world, which is quite an interesting book. And I got it for Christmas. I've only just started reading it, and immediately within the first couple of chapters it's talked about a couple of experiments that the authors did and people that the authors knew did that was to do with understanding the behaviour of psychopaths and what actually went on inside their head. You have psychopaths that exist inside of prisons and that are rapists and serial killers and murderers and robbers and every bad thing under the sun. But then you also have a lot of successful psychopaths as well. And a lot of the books about what is the difference between the CEO and the serial killer, even though they both have psychopathic mentalities. But anyway, some of the experiments they did in this book absolutely fascinated me. And one of these experiments, I don't exactly know numbers or anything like that, but it's more qualitative results is what I can give you from the things that I learned from this book, is that a group of people, where I think 5 of them had this scarlet handkerchief, which was something that they were supposed to be hiding when going through airport security. Now you can imagine airport security has to be quite tight after global events have happened, and generally we need to make sure people on planes are actually safe and there's not things that shouldn't be on the planes on those planes. I mean, you know exactly what I'm thinking, but anyway. But they also gathered a group of other people who were acting as the airport security to see if people who had these scarlet handkerchiefs, if they could actually identify the people that technically had something to hide. As if you could almost smell the fact that they had something to actually try get through this airport security level with. And if that could actually be beneficial to society if you put psychopaths, a certain group of people. But anyways, those who scored highest on the self-survey psychopathic test, where you have to answer a bunch of questions on your behavioural traits and what you do in certain decisions and stuff like that, and those who scored highest and high for psychopathy on these tests were able to identify the people who had these scarlet handkerchiefs, something to hide, essentially, way more effectively than those who were just normal people and did not have any psychopathic traits whatsoever. I know you may be thinking, how on earth does this whole psychopathy survey, self-survey, actually work? Because people who may, like, in a weird sort of way, like, want to be psychopaths in some kind of cringe internet Sigma TikTok bullshit or whatever, they might, like, self-test themselves purposefully high on psychopathy tests, but these tests are designed so that's quite hard to do. And these people also don't know they're taking a psychopathy test. They're probably getting paid to do this experiment, and so they really don't care. They will answer the questions as honestly as they like, because otherwise they may not get paid if someone, whoever's running the experiment, actually finds out that they lied. And that's not what they want. But anyways, those who were psychopaths as defined by the test, able to identify these people who had something to hide, way more effectively than normal people, which was really interesting. Like, that would genuinely make the world a better place if genuinely normally functioning psychopaths were actually in these kind of careers and job positions, because that would make the world safer. That's a brilliant way to utilize science to make the world a better place. Some things that psychopaths seem to be oddly particularly good at is they can literally smell the fear and smell something in people that just, they know that something is up, and they can tell things about this. There was another experiment about serial killers and rapists and how they'd identify victims and targets in a really, really creepy way. And those who had the highest rates of being victims of these kind of crimes like rape and assault, etc., psychopaths who did do things like these rape and assault and serial killing and stuff like that, they would literally be able to identify their victim's vulnerability by their walk, which was incredibly creepy. But it also was the fact that those psychopaths who were in prison, when they were showed videos of people who were literally walking, mostly women, were literally just walking down a path or a hallway or something like that, psychopaths in prison identified the women's mostly vulnerabilities to the same level that these women felt like they had been victims of things like assault, rape and crime, which is interesting. So now these psychopaths, those who they identified as vulnerable and those they choose as a victim if they were not in prison, the victims that they were shown through a camera or something like that, they self-identified themselves as those who had been victims of things like rape and assault most commonly, which is an interesting thing that shows that psychopathy, which is another interesting experiment. And this links to the final experiment that was talked about in the first chapter of this book, was how psychopaths can literally smell the fear of people. What a genius psychologist did was they took the sweat, it sounds disgusting, but they took the sweat of people who were exercising on a treadmill versus the sweat of people who were skydiving. And skydiving, you can imagine that's quite a scary thing to do, right? And they gathered a group of people who again did the whole self-survey psychopathy test. Those who were psychopaths were way more likely to successfully identify the fearful sweat, which is incredibly creepy when you think about it. But also that's a genius experiment to think of and come up with. When I was talking about the whole idea, experiment, decision, implementation thing earlier, that idea is absolutely genius. The way they managed to conduct that experiment is genius. And then how they can use that experiment to actually make the world a better place is probably yet to come, I suppose. With the airport experiment that I talked about first, that is an easy way to make the world a better place. Using psychopaths who haven't had a traumatic childhood or whatever, that have ended up actually being serial killers and murderers and all that sort of stuff with completely no remorse and no emotion whatsoever. Integrating them as a part of society to actually make the world a better place is a very, very useful and interesting thing to think about. I just wanted to talk about the whole meaning of science in an experimentational sense rather than the theoretical sense, which I do find quite interesting. But these experiments seemed absolutely genius, and I would actually love to think of these kind of things and conduct these kind of things myself one day. But with that, I recommend subscribing for more content like this, and have a good day.